Hello, and welcome to the second in our Healthy Minds speaker series. I'm extremely pleased that you can join us today. We held our first session last week, and we had over 650 people log in. And we've heard from a number of you, so it was people who work at Maple Leaf, and it was also members of their family. And we're extremely happy that you're able to join us. My name is Peter Neufeld, and I'm part of the HR team here at Maple Leaf. The format that we're going to take this week is going to be the same as we did last week. We're going to have a guest speaker who I'll introduce in a moment, and then we're going to follow it up with a Q&A. And this is a really critical point where we can hear from you and answer your questions. So I'm going to take a minute right now and direct you to the icon so you can be ready to ask questions. And you should see it in the top corner of your screen. There's a little figure with his hand raised, and you can click on that and you should be able to ask your question. So with this, I'd also like to point out that Dr. Bill Howitt, who joined us last week, is also going to be on the call today. And our plan is that Dr. Howitt is going to join us with all of our sessions, and he'll join the guest speaker in terms of answering your questions. So we'll have a bit of a virtual panel, and I think it'll be great that we can interact this way and have some continuity. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest today. And I'm really pleased to introduce you to Katy Kamkar. We had the opportunity to meet earlier and had a tremendous discussion. Dr. Kamkar is a clinical psychologist at CAMH, so the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. She's also a professor at University of Toronto, and you might have even seen her on different events. Even one that intrigued me was your work with the Invictus Games. So Dr. Kamkar is going to be speaking today on how to charge your internal battery by looking at self-compassion. And so Dr. Kamkar, welcome to Maple Leaf. Glad you can join us, and over to you.
Well, what can I say? Thank you so much from the heart for having me. What a tremendous pleasure and honor. And especially during this, as we all call it globally, we have felt it is this trying time. And certainly, I think that throughout all my years of work as a psychologist is really around my work with the community that is truly, truly a passion of mine. So thank you again for having me. Yes, so yeah, you see, we have all noticed, and thank you again for covering that tremendously important topic. What we have noticed globally is that suddenly a life has been changed and has been turned around. A daily structure, daily routine, and almost everything kind of has changed, or for some people kind of being shattered in terms of employment or even housing situation, and pretty much everything. And so, of course, this is going to generate range of emotions, range of thoughts. From emotions, we're talking about could be a lot of anxiety and fear. It could be feelings of anger, sadness. And in terms of thoughts, of course, a lot of anxious thoughts, worries about employment or being laid off, or financial concerns, a fear of infection or even contaminating others. And there is also, we can definitely see COVID-19 related to grief as well, and grief really very much works on a continuum. We do know a lot of people report, for example, on one end of the continuum around missing, for example, going out and having the daily coffee and newspaper, going to the office, to, of course, being able to attend social events. And of course, to the other extreme, with the death and the losses, and at times even difficulty reuniting with the loved ones, or funerals and so on. So we know that there is a grief and devastation throughout the entire line of continuum. The reason why I'm mentioning that is that it's very important for us to recognize that these are very normal reactions. And we are going through this one way or another, one extent to another. So these are very normal reactions, and it's important to recognize them and normalize them. The other thing also people often report is this feeling more fatigued, feeling kind of maybe brain scattered, or the productivity is not necessarily the same as before. That's also something very normal as well. one thing we know, there is a pandemic going on. And so what happens is that a flight and fight response, the inbuilt alarm system that we all have, is activated because, of course, we know there is a danger, there is a threat going on. So we know, for example, when we go out, we have to exert care. There is a physical distancing. There is always the news coverage going on. And even, you know, we can joke around. I mean, I joke with people around that even, you know, grocery shopping, things that you wouldn't think about before, that sometimes it could be relaxing, or, you know, you wouldn't think about it twice. You know, I say to people now, my goodness, what a stress, what a nightmare almost with the grocery shopping. You buy everything, you have, you know, what you touch, you cannot touch. And then you bring everything, you have to wash everything and how you wash it. And now people share with one another how to wash everything. So again, if we think about it, everything now that we used not to think about, now we need to think about it and take care of it. And so, of course, this is going to drain a lot of energy. So once we know all of that, and of course, not to mention the stress related to isolation and quarantine and everything, one thing is important, and here's the topic of self-compassion, is that, yes, while we are navigating through the COVID-19 and it talks about our health and physical health is also our mental health. Mental health is our physical health. Health is health, whether it's physical or mental health. And so there are some key strategies and plan that we do need to exert and work on. And what I always emphasize, I always want everyone, for you to engage and construct very much and build your own individualized self-care plan. That's what it is, because we are all different. Our needs are different. Our tolerance level is different. Lives are different. There's childcare, there's support for elder care. So it's very much create your own individualized self-care approach. So I think that if everyone here right now has a paper pen, or you want to type on your cell phone, whatever that is, this is what I want everyone to engage in those homework right now. We all need to engage in new structure and routine, whether we like it or not. It has to do with new structure and routine. Why? Because as individuals, that's how we function best. Now, there are some things out there that it says, well, wake up at this time, make sure you wear your home clothes, make sure you have your 1 hour walk every day, etc., etc. I think that, yes, sometimes those tips work, and sometimes, more often than not, actually, it might not work. So what it means is that create a structured routine that does work for you. Of course, you need to have your sleep hygiene. You need to schedule a time that does work, that is productive, that you wake up in the morning. And I would say, you know, we want to make sure we have a glass of water. We engage in stretching exercises, however you want it. But we do need to set important activities, so work-related, variety of other very meaningful new projects that we all need to set while we are in isolation. So when we have the new structure and new routine, it demands a lot of flexibility and creativity as well. And so part of that also, the second important strategy and plan for us is to keep in touch. It is true that we feel alone and we are isolated, but we are not socially isolated. If we look at, for example, compared to 20, 30 years ago, we are, my goodness, I mean, we are very fortunate we have the technology, even right now, that we are able to connect. And so use technology to your benefit, however you want. You want to text, you want to email, FaceTime, Skype, virtual video, however you want it, but keep in touch every day with whoever you want. There are some people, once again, they're very creative. They're like, you know, every Friday night, I'm not able to join my group of friends I used to. Now we are having a virtual video. We all make our meals, and now we all share our meals together. There are some people who are having now their Saturday cocktail time together, afternoon tea together, however you want it. But keeping in touch is tremendously helpful, and seeking support, quality support, can make a tremendous difference. Now, setting boundaries is important. Boundaries come, of course, for anything, but we do know, once again, there's a lot of news going on, and everyone's need and tolerance level is very different. So setting a time between, of course, we need to get that daily update and news, and also setting boundaries between, okay, now I also need to engage in other activities, especially if we feel that everything we hear drives a lot of anxiety. Then once again, setting boundaries around that is very helpful. Now, everyone's life is very different. There are some people who need to engage in juggle a lot of roles and activities and multitasking inside their house. It could be maybe working from home, childcare, now household and cooking and baking and cleaning. So what that means is, as we always know, prioritizing responsibilities. It could be delegating tasks, but really prioritizing responsibilities. And then also not forgetting the time for self. So sometimes that might entail isolating within isolation. So I saw once a funny cartoon that, there was this little, guy, the little child, who opens the door of the closet and said, "I found mommy there." So yeah, that means that, you don't want, to engage in like burnout or your fuse to become even shorter. You need to engage in your, what we call the me time, your self time within that isolation. Very important. Sorry. Now, we do know through studies how physical exercise and also healthy diet has a direct impact on our mood and our health. Very much engaging healthy diet and physical exercise, very important. And again, I emphasize to everyone, create your own healthy lifestyle. You want to have treat, absolutely have your treat. Well, we cannot always have a treat every day either. So balance and make sure that there is a healthy diet. Now we also hear of increasing alcohol use. So that's something that once again, it's important to engage in moderate use, that we need to exert care. And physical exercise, however you want it. Stretching exercise, intense workout, it could be inside the house or going outside, maintaining physical distancing. I know a lot of people have found a lot of benefit from. There are a lot of apps also free that people have engaged in. It could be yoga, it could be dancing classes, it could be a variety of other exercises that they have been able to join, and they found that it's very helpful to them. Of course, we have a lot of worries to engage. We have a lot of worries. They're extremely understandable worries that we all go through. And a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty, we do know as human beings, we do not like uncertainty, which we understand from an evolutionary perspective why we do not like it. But uncertainty also doesn't always mean that it is going to be associated with something bad. Even though we might always we have a tendency to associate it with something bad. But uncertainty also means that I do not know, and we need to accept and tolerate the I don't know. One of the best ways for us to really cope with worries is how to distinguish current worries and potential worries. So really around focusing our control on time and energy to what we call current worries. So current worries are the problems that right now I do have, and I want to engage in problem solving. So seeking resources, could be websites, seeking support, really around how can I make a to-do list and put my right now I am facing. And of course, around all of those speak to what we call psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is my ability to recognize my range of thoughts and emotions, but also being able to revise my goals, revise my interpretations, revise my expectations, because again, the circumstances and outcomes are very different. And really recognizing that whenever we are able to revise our expectations and interpretations, we're actually able to achieve a better outcome, a more realistic outcome. So of course, all of those speak to self-compassion. Why? Because all of those speak to self-care. Self-compassion is the relationship we have with ourselves, especially during difficult times. So it involves being mindful, as I mentioned, about our thoughts, about our range of emotions, not to overly identify with them, but it is to identify them so that we can focus on the moment and the present time, the here and now, and we can take an objective stance towards them. Because it is when we are able to take an objective stance towards our thoughts and emotions, we are able to put them into perspective that, once again, problem solve them, and then we feel more confident, we feel better. Self-esteem goes upper. Self-kindness, all those self-care involve self-kindness. And self-kindness is important, especially because it helps us to reduce our tendency to judge ourselves. Whenever we are not able to engage in the activities and routines we used to do before, we feel that the identity has been shattered, and we have a tendency to judge ourselves because, again, we have a tendency to measure our sense of self based on our activities. So we need to catch our negative self-thoughts and to really balance them. And also then part of it is acknowledging part of humanity. We all human beings, no one is perfect. And when we are acknowledging that we all part of this human experience, then we do know that there's a lot of self-kindness, but then also it helps to reduce self-isolation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamkar. I really like and appreciate the way that you said everyone is going to have their own plan, because we're all having an individual experience. Probably a lot of you have seen this meme that's been going around lately, and it's saying we're all in the same storm, but we're on different ships. And I think everyone's experience is really different. So thank you for what you've covered. We've got some questions coming in now. And folks, I remind you again to please feel free to ask your questions. But a question here that's come up is saying, how can we actually identify when we're not being compassionate to ourselves? And how can we actually change that? I think the person is speaking more to be they're kind of in a behavior that they recognize is not helping them. And what can you do to change it? First to recognize and then change. Any advice?
Yeah, and I love that question. Thank you so much for that question. Here's the thing. What I always say, everything works from head to toe. Look at yourself from your behaviors or your actions. Look at your emotions. Look at your thoughts. And look at your physiological reactions. We need to always be aware of all those components to have a better understanding and identify where is it that I have changed or I think that I'm not engaging in that self-kindness. Definitely, if we look at thoughts, if we look at, wow, my thoughts towards myself are not good at all. I'm engaging in negative self-talk, negative self-labeling. And the typical ones we all hear is, I'm weak, I'm so stupid, I'm an idiot, I'm X, Y, and Z. We do have a tendency to engage in those negative self-talk. Catch yourself right away. Behavior-wise, if, for example, you see a drastic change in your behaviors and how you used to treat yourself, then now you see that, you know what, you're not doing the gym exercise you used to do. You're drinking maybe more. You're engaging in more substance use or misuse. You're not engaging in a healthy diet anymore. You're not seeking support or helping with loved ones. Any of those behavior changes that you know go against those self-kindness practices, then you know there is something going on. And also if people have noticed something and changing you, we need to pay attention to that too, because a lot of times, sometimes other people might notice more a change towards us that we might notice about ourselves. Now, here's the thing. If you notice that your mood really is not good, like you feel more down, more days than not, there's a tremendous anxiety that you feel is not controllable. There's irritability, there's anger. Your sleep is very disturbed. Your appetite has drastically changed. Your concentration is really down. There is reduced pleasure in all your activities, and also you have difficulty functioning every day. Not only is it important to seek support, but please also, there's always professional help available as well. A lot of people do that now. There is virtual therapy. Therapy works, virtual therapy works. And I want people to know you're not alone. Like, we're not alone. Like, we need to seek help. We're all human beings. We're all in the same boat. And I love what you said. We're all in the same storm, but different shift. If you allow me, Peter, I'm going to steal that, if you allow me with that. So I want to make sure the person got an understanding here, how to identify and what to do about it. And I would say all the strategies we just talked about.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things to it, if you don't mind. Is that one of the things I think too is sometimes we don't have a clear frame of reference of what self-compassion looks like for yourself too. So if you're not being self-compassionate to yourself and you're pretty clear what you're doing, as Katy talked about, you're doing some negative thinking and self-sabotage and perhaps some self-medicating, look for symptom relief. One of the things we sometimes want to do is learn how to give ourselves a break and what does self-compassion look like? And if you were being compassionate to yourself, what would you be doing? And I find that's interesting because sometimes people just get stuck with, okay, if I'm being kind to myself, what does that look like? How would I know I'm being kind to myself? Is that the thoughts I do, or is it things I do for other people? And we sometimes get that kind of confused. So I would encourage you to spend a few minutes actually saying to yourself, okay, if I am self-compassionate to myself, does that mean I give myself a break? Does that allow myself to stop and relax? Does that give myself some time to be able to give myself permission to know that I don't need to be perfect, because I find that lots of people struggle with this kind of reality that it's all or nothing, and they struggle with, actually, we're not perfect, we are fallible, and giving ourselves that opportunity. So learning how to give ourselves a break, but it's hard if you don't have a set of goalposts.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you so much. And I think with what you're describing too, and is often people are much more compassionate to others than they are to themselves. And that can be a part of the metric, saying, if I met myself, how would I treat? Thank you both. There's a question here on parenting that's come up, and I think it's one that a number of people can probably relate to. It says, I hardly have the energy to get up and work all day, and in this case, take care of a special needs child. Any advice on how I can get the energy to exercise and engage in social networking? So, a tough situation. What are your thoughts in terms of small ways that this person can move forward?
You go first, and I'm happy to follow.
So this is an important question. Of course, when there is work, there is so many other duties and also children involved. What I want to know about is the reduced energy. We want to know, as I have mentioned before, energy is down because of, again, everything, all the threat going on, our fight and fight response being activated, and our life has drastically changed overnight. So, of course, energy is going to go down, and also there's going to be probably feeling overwhelmed. We want to identify what are the sources that are leading to this reduced energy. Is it because of feeling overwhelmed? Is it because the activity of exercise has gone down? Maybe of any, again, self-care has gone down, or is it also maybe could be related to a medical factor? So we really want to make sure that there is no organic or medical basis that is really also going down to the reduced energy. Once we know the source, then we can definitely better problem solve it. But again, as we mentioned, as part of the self-compassion and knowing that we're not perfect, but it's also setting maybe more realistic goals and flexibility around what is it that I'm able to do right now. Let me prioritize the responsibilities. Let me delegate certain things. My expectation around what is productive right now is going to be very different from what it was maybe a month or 2 months ago. So maybe setting 2-3 activities, being able to engaging in them, and then also seeking support.
Yeah, and to build on that is to tap into some previous memories. For example, stress is normal for people when the cortisol levels are high to feel stress, and the challenges of having a special need child. I have one myself, and I understand what the drain is, because there is no option for an off switch. The challenge here is that sometimes if we can remember that if we actually burn energy, being an old phys ed guy, we burn energy, we can get energy. So sometimes it's tapping into those memories where, you know what, when I do some activity, I can actually get some energy. But to the point around making sure you have the root cause. However, in a pandemic, under stress of working from home, dealing with a child, some self-care and making time for yourself would be fairly normal. To be challenging with that is tapping into some of your routines and trying to get a couple successes. And off the other side, like how many times we've gone to the gym and we didn't or exercise, we didn't look forward to doing it, but on the other side, we felt better. So we can do a little future pacing, and that sometimes can help us too.
Thank you both. So there's a question here looking for more clarity around saying, what's the difference between being self-compassion and selfishness? And that might be on some people's mind, because the idea of self-compassion can be a little bit of a novel term. And how would you kind of clarify that for a person?
I'll follow you. I like our format.
Okay. Thank you. I like that question. Here is why. People say, well, if I'm engaging in self-compassion, then maybe that means that I'm selfish, or I'm being too nice with myself. Maybe I'm being self-centered. I'm not being nice, and so on. Well, here it is. Already that question pinpoints to a negative thoughts we might have about ourselves, or negative conception about self-compassion. That becomes a gigantic barrier to self-compassion. If I am assuming that, oh, I'm being self-compassionate, it means I'm selfish, that's being bad, then we're not going to be kind towards ourselves. Now, here's the thing. The kinder we are towards ourselves, we are able to engage in self-care. We have this compassion with ourselves, and we know this through research. We are actually more open with others. We become more compassionate with others. We become less judgmental towards others. Self-compassion and being selfish are entirely different constructs on the extreme end of the continuum. So self-compassion is, I need to respect my own needs. I need to respect who I am as a human being, my thoughts, my emotions, my needs. In identifying our thoughts, but in also the same way that we are saying, not engaging in negative self-labeling with ourselves, not engaging in negative self-labeling with ourselves. So really identifying, as we say for others, balance your thoughts, no one is perfect, and do not judge yourself.
Yeah, and to add on that, the way to think about selfishness is at the expense of other human beings. So you're doing something that when you're thinking selfish, you might be withholding or taking something away. Self-compassion is, as she said, I want to reiterate everything because I agree with 100%. One thing I'll let you to throw out to think about, I'm thinking about it right now, is that I published an article today on compassion fatigue. And I think what we have to remember is that if you're over caretaking and focusing other people, and you're not taking care of yourself, you may not have as much energy to take care of other people. So part of this is actually making sure that you're able to be there and show up for other people by giving yourself some time for yourself.
That's great. Thank you so much. There's a question here that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to, and I'll read it directly. With working remotely, the separation between work and life is becoming very blurred. I'm finding guilt creeping into my life time because I should be working. And they put in quotes, I should be working. How do I make it okay to shut off work and turn on my life in my head?
Ooh, good one. Go ahead. I like that one.
So did the person mean that they feel that they should be working more, they have difficulty working more, or do they feel that they are working like literally like over 10 hours and now they really have to take time for dinner and stretching and they feel guilty? Or it could be more both.
I think it's really around, they're saying that the separation, we're used to drive to the office, you do your work and you leave. And now the day, and often I hear people even say the weekends are kind of blurring. People often have to be reminded what day it is.
Every day.
Every
day. What they're talking about is a construct around enmeshment.
Yep.
And enmeshment is, and you mentioned it, Katy, it's about boundaries. It's being able to understand boundaries. But the thing that we need to be aware of is that if you say to yourself, I'm going to work to finish these things, it's not to keep moving the goalposts. The average person now, since this COVID-19, it seems to be working longer that are home. And it makes sense is because they're trying to actually learn how to work remotely, and they're trying to figure out how to actually adjust things, plus their core job. However, we're getting to the point now, and I would put this out there for everyone to consider it, is that this is just one phase of a process. We're going to need more energy for the next phase than this one. So that's why it's really important for us to be able to start getting boundaries for ourselves and be able to set expectations for ourselves and become comfortable with them by working with our manager and our team to ensure that we're getting feedback that everything's getting done. Through practice and conversation, we might be able to get more comfortable with setting our own boundaries of what success looks like for us today.
So speaking of boundaries, I've committed that we'll keep these sessions right on track. And if you can believe it, we're already done our time today. Dr. Kamkar, Dr. Howard, thank you both so much for being with us today. And folks on the phone and on your computers, thank you again for joining in. Again, if you require more significant support, please reach out to the different supports that we have. You can also know that we're keeping track of your questions. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have one session probably in a couple of weeks where we'll just make it all about Q&A. So we're keeping a tally of all your questions, and in that week we'll spend the 30 minutes just doing Q&A. The other thing I'd like to highlight is we're going to send out a calendar. A lot of these amazing experts have come to us, on short notice, and it's fantastic. And as much as possible, we're going to give you advance notice on our calendar on what it looks like for the next few weeks. So again, Dr. Kamkar, thank you. Dr. Howard, thank you. And everyone, Maple Leaf and your families, I wish you a great day. Bye.
Thank you. All the best.